Hello, my friends. Today, we're going to take a look at process on the exam. Now, process, it often sounds a little bit hard, especially from the PMBOK guide perspective. So we're going to take a look at a project, and we're going to take a look at how to think about the 5 process groups. And then I'm going to give you some quizzes, going to go through some questions with you, and I'm also going to talk about how to tackle the exam. So this is quite a bit of a big session. So your major takeaways are going to be understanding all the process groups and knowledge areas and processes at a sufficient level. Then we're going to talk about how to tackle the exam from an emotionally intelligent perspective so that you can answer questions that are built to trick you, but you're going to be focusing on the EI side. And then I'm also going to give you any other pointers that can help you on the exam. All right, so let's jump straight into our discussion for today. So I call this Process Groups 101. It's the Asian Cuisine project. These are all things that I've used to cook. Actually, what I've cooked is on the right-hand side. I like cooking Asian cuisine, and I'm going to use that as the subject for my illustration today. All right, so let's jump straight into it. When you take a look at this page, you immediately recoil in horror. You want me to study all of this stuff? No, I'm not going to study all of this stuff. It's too much. But I want to show you the simplicity in it. All right. So think about an Asian cuisine project. Imagine you were cooking food for people, right? It started off with a request. And then from the request, you then authorize the project to cook a meal. It could be a meal for family members. It could be a meal for visitors, for guests. So the first stage is to authorize the project, to authorize the undertaking. And that is just called developing the project charter. So for your exam, you got to know that developing a project charter should be the first thing you do in terms of the processes and the process groups. And we call that initiating. Initiating consists of 2 things. 1, it's developing a charter that authorizes the project. And 2, it's identifying your stakeholders. So if I'm cooking a meal, I could ask the question, who is going to eat this meal? Who could be impacted by my deciding to cook this meal? Those are my stakeholders. And it's pretty simple. That's it at a very high level. That's initiating. So going back here, when you take a look at this, you can see initiating has these 2 things. Developing the project charter and identifying stakeholders. It's really that simple. There's no need to complicate it. All right, just keep it at that level and you're good. Developing a charter to authorize the project and identifying stakeholders. Now, going a step further, going into the aspect of planning. What do we do in planning? We could summarize everything that is done in planning under this one statement. Develop a project management plan. It's that simple. Develop a project management plan. That's what we do in planning. That is the summary. Now, if we go back to this table and we look at planning, what do you see? Right here at the top is the confluence of everything else that falls underneath it. All of this stuff, the end game of all of this stuff that I've highlighted in light red, the confluence of everything here is this final thing: develop project management plan. All of this stuff here is what we're trying to do. That's the summary. So for your exam, my friends, I want you to think about these things one by one as I bring them up on the screen. Scope management. We got to plan everything about the scope, whether we're doing it in iterations or whether we're going to do it at once. We need to plan how to manage scope. We need to actually define the scope and get down to the granular bits of scope. We need to understand the requirements. That's what we're doing in project scope management. The other piece of scope management is really to ensure there are no additions that are unauthorized. If there are any additions, they have to be authorized. And we're making sure that the customer validates the scope by inspecting the deliverable. It's that simple. So when you're talking about knowledge areas, you don't need to you don't need to hit your head against a brick wall, my friends. It's that simple. Just understanding that everything we're doing here is about either planning, scope related items, or monitoring and controlling scope related items. It's that simple. So when you take a look at this planning aspect, you got to think about it more macro for your PMP exam today. You don't want to go down into too much detail. You want to keep it at this high level. So the bottom line is we need to plan scope, right? We need to identify what needs to be done. Then we need to plan schedule. We need to create a schedule. And a schedule is pretty much the start and finish dates for the activities. We need to plan cost. In other words, we need to estimate each of those line items and roll it up into a total budget. We need to plan which quality items or which quality standards do we need to adhere to. That's quality management. We need to plan how to manage the resources, and then we estimate the resources as well. See that? You got to think about them in blocks, big blocks like that. You see what I'm doing here? You need to think about communications, and then you need to plan how we're going to communicate. You need to think about risk, and then you need to plan how we're going to manage risks. And then you need to identify the risks, and you need to analyze the risks and create a response for the risks. Next, we need to plan procurement management. We need to plan what are we going to buy from outside the firm. And then last but not least, we have stakeholder management. We need to plan how to engage our stakeholders. And that's planning, my friends. All of this stuff is what we are ultimately trying to do when we say develop project management plan, because we're going to get all of these tinier plans. We're going to put them all together in one big plan. See what I mean? That's planning in a nutshell. In a nutshell. All right. Now, when planning is done, you got to execute. So these are all little images from my experiments in the kitchen, right? Trying to cook this Asian cuisine. There's this Asian cuisine my kids love, and I took it upon myself to find the secret recipe. Well, of course, I had to create a recipe in some way by trial and error, but executing is where you are actually carrying out the work. So when I'm carrying out the work and doing all the cooking, that is the executing. So let's take a look at what executing is. When you really boil it down, executing is all about carrying out the work. It could be the cooking, right? So I'm cooking this dish. That's really my job in executing. Executing is all about taking the plan and doing the work. Take the plan, do the work. Take the plan and begin to execute on the plan. In the world of IT, software development, of course, it's going to look very different from this. It's going to be coding. It's going to be doing programming kind of work. It's going to be at some point doing some analysis as you are carrying out the work, as you're executing. You may have some feedback loop to go back and analyze. So you could have planning and executing with some feedback loops. But the bottom line is you are going to be doing the work. And that's really what we do in executing. So when you go back here, my friends, I want you to really understand that what is being done in this process group is the executing of what you just compiled in planning. That's how you need to see it. Executing is all of this stuff that we do here. And it's very simple. When you're executing, you are directing and managing the work, coordinating the work as it's been executed. You are sharing knowledge and gleaning knowledge. You are checking to make sure the process is being followed. You are acquiring team members or resources. You're developing the team. You're leading the team, which is called managed team. You're giving them feedback. You are communicating, which we call managed communications. You are carrying out risk responses. You are conducting procurements. In other words, you are selecting a seller and awarding a contract. and you are managing the stakeholders' engagement. And these are all things we do in executing. It is that simple. For those of you who are just coming, we're talking about the 5 process groups, and we're going to go into some more detail to get you in ship shape for your exam. I know some of you might be struggling with the exam content. Look no further. I want you to go on down to hpmexam.com. At hpmexam.com, we have training that can help you. There's actually a book called PMP Exam Immersion that comes with our training. So go on down to hpmexam.com. If you are struggling, we're having this week a boot camp. Just go on down to the site, register for it. It's a 4-hour boot camp. It's very rapid. And at the end of it, you will have a much better understanding of this exam. All right. So again, executing, my friends. What we're doing is we are carrying out that plan, whether we are cooking, prepping the food. In the world of IT, like I said, you could be coding. In the world of technical documentation, you could be creating a technical document. Whatever that looks like, the bottom line is work is being done. Work is being carried out. Okay. Now let's jump really quick into a question here. Company stakeholders have requested that your canteen serve a new Asian cuisine. This will require the installation of new equipment and hiring of a new team. The scope baseline and schedule baseline have been determined. What should the project manager do next? All right. Okay. So let's take a look and use the process of elimination to cancel things that you wouldn't do next. You can use the pause button if you need more time. So it says the scope baseline has been determined. So obviously you've already done A, so it won't be that. It says you have just done the baseline. So you wouldn't be doing project reporting immediately, probably not, right? Let's take a look at D. Implement risk responses for the installation. Well, if you've done the scope baseline, schedule baseline, you are in planning, you're not going to jump all the way into executing and begin implementing risk responses. So the best answer to this, my friends, is to complete the project plan. That's exactly what you would do. You would complete your efforts to create the project management plan. Let's take a look at yet another question. Company stakeholders have requested that your canteen serve a new Asian cuisine. You decide to complete this project using a flow-based agile approach. In this approach, the delivery cadence is what? All right. If you need more time, you can hit the pause button. We'll use the process of elimination. So because it's flow-based agile, there's no cadence. So it's not going to be every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks or once a month. There's no cadence in flow-based. So the best answer is flexible. You see, when you understand what you're being asked, it becomes a lot easier to answer these questions. All right, so now we've kind of covered a few things in the planning aspect. Let's jump back into our discussion and talk a little bit more about the monitoring and controlling aspect because we haven't hit that. So in monitoring and controlling, these are the things we're doing right over here. See that? Right over there, okay? Let's go over these really quick, one by one. So in monitoring and controlling, you are doing the overall coordination of the monitoring and controlling work. You are doing performing integrated change control, and that means if there are any change requests, you are ensuring that those requests get put through the right process for you to check and assess the impact and decide. Validate scope, like I said, is where your client is checking the deliverables for correctness. Control scope is where you're preventing scope from being added without proper permission. Control schedule is where you're keeping the project on schedule. Control cost is where you're keeping the project on cost. Control quality is where you, the performing organization, you're checking the work to ensure that it does comply with quality standards. Control resources is where you are ensuring that the resources were used as planned. And we're talking about physical resources here. Monitor communications. This is where you are monitoring the communication efforts on the project to make sure that communications are really going according to plan. And you know what? If the communications are not going according to plan, then you need to make an adjustment. You need to get the project back on track as far as the communications are concerned. And this could entail you replanning. You see, a lot of the executing aspects and monitoring and controlling aspects, they involve some executing to do the work, but then we also check to ensure that things are going according to plan in the monitoring and controlling step. And if they're not going according to plan, then we are going to go back to the drawing board. We're going to figure out how to do it better. And then we're going to come back with a vengeance and we're going to do it better. And that's how we work in the world of project management. And that's why you hear people saying plan, do, check, act, plan, do, check, act, because everything that you do in project management will fit into one of those buckets of plan, do, check, or act. The next thing here is to monitor the risks, make sure that the risks, let's go back, make sure that the risks have not changed, make sure that the risks are still what we imagine them to be, have monitor risk for that. Then we have control procurement, making sure that the seller or sellers are delivering what they promise. And we have monitor stakeholder engagement, ensuring that you are indeed on the right track as far as monitoring, as far as stakeholder engagement is concerned. If your stakeholders aren't engaged, then you need to, again, devise another means, a better way of engaging them and go back and do that. All right. So we've taken a look at quite a lot of things here, my friends. We've gone from initiating all the way to monitoring and controlling. So I want us to take a look at a few more questions. So we took a look at a question before we jumped into monitoring and controlling. Let's jump into this one. So the sponsor has requested that the Asian Cuisine project begin immediately. This is a very critical project for the firm with a short amount of time to complete it. What should the project manager do first? Think about it. Okay. Let's take a look at the answers. So again, we're going to use the process of elimination. If the sponsor is requesting that this happens, just know that the feasibility analysis has been done, right? So what you should do first is obviously not that. Taking a look at B, it says create a clear, detailed. Whenever you get words like this on the exam, you got to pay attention to them. A detailed schedule is not the first thing you do. You can have a high-level schedule, but a detailed schedule will not be done at this point. Next one says perform a feasibility study. It's very similar to option A. We wouldn't do that. That would be done in conjunction with a business case, which should have already been done. So if the sponsor is saying begin this immediately, the most sensible thing for you to do is to create a project charter. Okay. Everything else should have either been done or is too far down the road for us to do. And that's the mindset going into the exam. You see, the PMP exam, it just requires that you remember, okay, this has been done. This is too far down the project. This one hasn't been done. And that's the mindset. Let's go to our next one. Our next question. All right. Your company is an Asian cuisine delivery service certified to meeting a certain industry standard. On this project, management realizes they cannot complete the project with available resources. They decide to outsource the project and sign a binding agreement with a third-party firm in Japan. What strategy does this best describe? All right. So what are they doing? They are outsourcing because they realize they cannot complete the project with the available resources. When you outsource, this is a good example of risk transfer. This is not accept because you are actually doing something. Accept is reactive. Risk avoidance would be not to do it. So the best answer is risk transfer. All right. So you've shifted this to a third party. That's the overarching idea. All right. Let's move on to our next question. Those just come in. Remember, hpmexam.com is your one-stop shop for a quick infusion of the content for your PMP exam. And if you're struggling, that's exactly where you want to go. We're going to be covering people, process, business. It's very rapid. It's like a tune-up. You go in, you come out, you are as good as new, or maybe you were never even there before. Now you're going to be right where you need to be, totally aware of everything you need for the test. Here's your next question. The project manager desires to close out the final project phase of the Asian Cuisine project. What should she do now? I'll let you think about it. All right, my friends, 3, 2, and 1. Let's go through the options one by one. So it says, what should she do now? She's trying to close out the final project phase. At this point, it is too late to ensure that all risks identified. This should have been done. It says identified, documented, and escalated. So it sounds intelligent, but it's something you should have done a while back. Ensure quality is managed to uphold quality standards. This should have been done prior. Let's take a look at the next one. Review the project plan to ensure completion of scope. And D says validate scope by comparing success criteria to deliverable. No, that's what your customer does, not you as the project manager. So right now, the best option is review the project plan to ensure completion of scope. Do you see how in these questions, my friends, we are not necessarily talking about process names. It's very high level. Did you see that? Because I know we went over a bunch of things here earlier. We went over all of this process group stuff. And when you hit the process group stuff, there's a tendency to think, oh, I need to cram all the names. No, a lot of times the names are not even going to help you. The names that you're reading, you may not even see those on the exam. So while it's not a bad thing to be aware of names, they won't help you in many instances. You just need a higher level understanding of how things interrelate, what should have been done first, what should have been done prior, and things such as that. All right, let's go to our next question. Okay, product manager believes that the process in your restaurant is out of control. The final project deliverable, the Asian Cuisine to-go bowl, has been tested based on a job batch of 1,000 and was found to weigh a lot less than expected. What tool should the project team use to decide if a change is needed in production? I'll let you think about it for a little bit. If you need more time, hit that pause button. Right. All right, my friends. So the best answer to this, let's use the process of elimination again. So the Ishikawa is a cause and effect diagram. It does not show you if a process is out of control. The same thing for D. A and D are the same tool. It's a cause and effect diagram, Ishikawa, YY diagram, fishbone diagram. Those are all the same thing. So you got to know some of these tools for your test for sure. All right, next we have scatter diagram going up. The scatter diagram shows if there's a correlation between variables, but it does not show if a process is out of control or in control. So the best answer for this, my friends, is the control chart. That's the best one to use. All right, let's move on to our next section in this. It's the final of the questions. Let's see what this one is. Actually, we have more questions. You have decided to employ an outside firm to manage all restaurant equipment installations due to the risk of configuration errors. Which risk management approach did you use? All right, you need more time, hit that pause button, but let's take a look. So anytime you read a question about risk and it says you have done this or you've decided to do this, if it's something proactive, like taking steps, not just putting money aside, because that's accept. Accept is putting money aside. But if it's stepping out and doing something proactive, it's not accept and it's not avoid. Again, just like the last question on risk, the answer is transfer. You are transferring the risk. Just remember that transferring a risk is when you transfer it to a third party to deal with the risk. You always should remember that piece. All right, let's move on. We got another question here. You're a project manager for a firm building a new restaurant in the city of Gilbert, Arizona. Midway in the project, a huge mineral reserve is suddenly discovered. As a result, a major highway must be diverted, homes will be displaced, and the highway will not be functional for 9 months. Which project management skills or tools will you need to best handle this? I'll let you think about it. Okay, if you need more time, hit the pause button. Okay, so think about it. This project says homes will be displaced and the highway will not be functional. This sounds like the populace in Gilbert will not be very pleased. So which of these skills do you need to best handle that situation? Management, budgeting, scheduling, and administrative skills, they're all well and good, but probably not going to work in your best interest if people are mad about the project. Let's see option B, ability to manage change. So it says midway in the project, a huge mineral reserve is suddenly discovered. That's definitely some change going on. So B is not a bad idea. Let's look at C. Best practice and SMEs in construction projects. That's all well and good, but it's not going to deal with the angry people. Good personal relationships with government officials involved. This sounds unethical in some way. You want to strong arm people with your relationship in government to use government to get people under control. That's unethical. That's not good. So this is really more of an ethics question as well as an EI question. And the answer is ability to manage change, EI, and interpersonal skills. These are the things you would need in a situation like that. Think about it. Homes are displaced. That's not going to be good. You need all the interpersonal skills possible to deal with that sticky situation. All right, let's take a look at our final area for today. Our final area as we go through this content is the closing process group, close project or phase. Again, more food, and that's the recipe I was talking about. That's the finished product. I tell you, you would not be able to get enough of it. Not just because I cooked it. And all of these are part of my handiwork. All right. So what are we doing in closing? Let's take a look. In closing, we are closing out either a phase in the project or project as a whole. So we have close project or phase. And that's pretty much what we're doing. We could close out a phase, we could close out an entire project. When it comes to closing out a contract, we're really more in this control procurement section, you see, but closing out the entire project is in the closing process group. And that's pretty much it for those 5 process groups, my friends. You see, the 5 process groups, it doesn't need too much trouble. Some people try to cram it. You just need to understand, okay, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? What am I doing here? Okay. I actually have a cheat sheet. If you just Google Phil's cheat sheet, actually, let me show you what that looks like, because I know some folks may not have downloaded my free cheat sheet. Phil's cheat sheet. And it's a free cheat sheet. Just go on down to this link that I'm going to show you on the screen here. And you can download that cheat sheet. Here we go. Let's click on that. Not that. Let's go back. I actually want to click on the PDF. That okay. So there's the PDF. And you can see for every process, I break down for you what exactly you're doing in that process. So this one, it just says, close down the project. That's in the way. Let me try and make it bigger for you. Oh, it's still blocking the way. Can you go? Can you go? Can you go? Okay. It's blocking my view, but it says close down the project or phase. You get the idea. And that's it. This cheat sheet, if you wanted to download it, just go to that link up there. Okay. And I will endeavor to put the link below as well if I'm able. But that's it. That's oh, are you seeing it? Good. Okay. That's pretty much it. That's it right there. Okay. So going back here, if you're struggling with understanding this, just use my cheat sheet. Use my cheat sheet, and it's going to give you a better understanding of how everything maps together. Again, there's the cheat sheet. So you can juxtapose cheat sheet and the actual page 25, not to cram it, but to understand the steps taken in managing a project. All right, for those of you who are just joining us, we are going over the 5 process groups, and we're also going to cover some things to help you on your exam. If you haven't gone to hpmexam.com to sign up for the 4-hour half-day bootcamp that's happening on Sunday, you want to do that right now, because we're going to get everyone in ship shape for the exam. We're going to make sure that all of these misunderstandings are cleared. So if you've been struggling, I want you to be in that class. All right. And if you found this video to be helpful to you, I'd appreciate you hitting like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you're notified when I come out with more videos for you. For those of you that are not fully aware, the PMP exam immersion training, it's based on a curriculum developed by my buddy Roy and I. You're going to get this 600-page book. This book is in color. It is a great breakdown and interesting as well for anyone taking the exam. And the really cool thing is we break down the chapters into the tasks, the 35 tasks in the PMP exam content outline of people, process, business. And the next thing I'm going to do here is give you the top of the waves idea about how to tackle the people, process, and business sections very quickly here. So let's jump into that for a quick second. How to tackle the PMP exam. People, the people piece. You always need to act in people's best interest. If there is a team issue, your options are going to be along the lines of mentoring and coaching and decision-making, conflict resolution, social contracts, team contracts. You could refer to those. If it's a stakeholder issue, Your options are going to be along the lines of communication, problem solving for sure, change management, issue log, change log, empathy, things like that. So you always want to act in people's best interest. It's either going to be team or stakeholder, wider stakeholders or the inner circle of the team. That's what it's typically going to be. Let's take a look at how to work with process. With process, you want to move things forward. So in initiating, your project charter is going to help move things forward. Your stakeholder analysis of your stakeholders is going to help you target your stakeholder expectations, wants, and needs sensibly. Then we have planning. In planning, your main thing is your project management plan. This is going to help you push the project forward, move the project forward along with the team. In terms of executing, your disposition here is to log issues, make sure you go after those impediments, have dialogue, and where necessary, have some change requests. You see, so whether you're in the world of Agile or you're in the world of predictive, you can always use the PMI's framework of 5 process groups to know what to do. When we are in the world of Agile, we may talk a little bit more about road mapping, for example. We'll talk a little bit more in the earlier stages about the Agile project charter. See, we talk about these things way up front. When we're doing this planning stuff, we actually, at this point in planning, we talk about the team charter in the world of Agile. So you can think about the 5 process groups from an Agile lens as well, if you wanted to. I know it's project related, but you could also look at authorization, planning, executing, and so on. When we're talking about executing from the Agile realm, we're talking about getting the work done. So things that come up here will be like your events, right? Your ceremonies, if you wanted to call them that. Your sprint planning will be done as part of planning, but you have the sprint itself, which is a bucket for everything you do. So when you talk about executing it, it's funny because you're doing a lot of things in the sprint. Within the sprint, you're doing some planning, but you're also doing the daily scrums, which again is also looked at as part of planning and executing because you are uncovering impediments, right? So you could talk about your dailies, which are used as a sync meeting. And I'll just say your daily scrum. You could also think about your sprint retrospective as being something that you do within the sprint. You could say it is in some way executing, it is in some way monitoring and controlling as well. It's more like an inspection, but it's also part of the things you need to get done. You see, so this is how you need to be thinking. You just think about the sprint, the daily scrum. Over here, one of the things we think about as well, you would think about your sprint or backlog, I should say, backlog refinement. And you would also think about your sprint planning. You see, so you should be able to look at both worlds and say, okay, from this world, I can see I'm in planning within Agile, and I'm developing my project management plan if I'm in the world of predictive. You see what I'm saying? In terms of the monitoring and controlling in predictive, you're doing reviews, you're doing change requests, right? And by that, I'm talking about sprint reviews. And we're also doing the retrospectives as well. So you could look at that as monitoring and controlling. You could say it's part of executing what needs to be done, however you want to see it. And then we talk about closing. Closing in the world of predictive is closing out a project or a phase. And actually in the world of predictive, when we talk about the lessons learned, we could also see our lessons learned as what we do all through, not only in closing. We should have our lessons learned being done as we are executing. We should be doing our lessons learned as well as we are going through monitoring and controlling. But I've put it at the end because it is like a confluence of everything. So however you want to see it, the bottom line is that in closing out a project, you should make sure you do that. We do it automatically as we're closing out a sprint, right? As we're ending a sprint, we're doing it. So just know what is done. If you wanted to compare them apples to apples, this is what makes process a little bit tricky. And that's why we spent time going over the process groups and the knowledge areas before we got into this. All right. Again, for those of you who are just coming, we're taking a look at some items to better understand project management for our PMP exam. And I told you in the beginning, if you're getting ready for your exam, you need to go on down to hpmexam.com if you are struggling, if you need a fast acceleration, if you're getting towards your exam date and you're not confident, you need to be in this class because I will be teaching you everything that you need to know on the people, process, business. And when I say everything, I mean everything. And we use the PMP exam immersion text as a baseline for you to go after the course, go over all the questions in people, process, business, and better understand the content. All right. So again, going back to where we were in process, we just took a look at several ideas as far as how to marry some of this agile stuff through a process lens as well. Remember, process doesn't mean PMBOK only. You're going to be dealing with PMBOK and Agile. Okay. Finally, the business aspect. My advice is to look at this from two perspectives. One is the firm, and you got to understand change affects the firm. You got to understand compliance could affect the firm, and the business environment could affect the firm. As a project manager or anything you are on a project, you should be attuned to change, compliance, and environment. The same at the project level. It may scale down a little bit, but there are changes on the project that could affect the firm, and there are changes in the firm that could affect the project. There's also the issue of compliance on projects. Lack of compliance on some projects could kill entire companies. And also bear in mind that the environment, the business environment, it could affect the project and how things are done. All right. And that pretty much is it, my friends. If you're really struggling with understanding this lay of the land, I want to encourage you that paying some more attention to this is not for naught, right? You don't need to cram. Instead, my recommendation is to understand. So I'll give you one word: authorization, identification, assembly. I'll give you a couple of words: planning scope, collecting requirements, fine-tuning scope, creating a hierarchy of the work, planning schedule, listing activities, putting activities in order, estimating how long things will take, developing the schedule, planning how to manage cost, estimating each task, summing up the total cost for all the tasks for the budget, planning how to manage quality, planning how to manage resources, estimating how much resources you need, planning how to communicate, planning how to manage risks, identifying risks, analyzing the risks scrappily, analyzing the risks from a monetary standpoint, and planning how to respond to risks, planning how to manage procurements, planning how to engage stakeholders, directing the project work, sharing knowledge and gleaning knowledge, managing quality through audits and checking the process, acquiring physical and human resources, training and coaching the team, developing the team as a unit, leading the team, communicating with stakeholders and everyone on the project as planned, carrying out risk responses, conducting procurements by awarding a contract to a seller or sellers, managing stakeholder engagement by working with stakeholders and communicating with them, monitoring and controlling the project work at a high level, managing changes on the project, customer inspects the deliverable, preventing scope increases without following proper protocol, ensuring the schedule is on track, ensuring the budget is on track, inspecting deliverables, ensuring resources are being used as planned, physical resources, checking your communications to ensure effectiveness, ensuring risks have not changed, and if they have, updating the risk register, ensuring that the seller has given you what you paid for, checking to ensure that stakeholders are engaged, and if not, changing the plan to engage them. And lastly, closing out a project or phasing a project. It's that simple, my friends. All right, I hope you found this to be helpful. Again, share with your friends. And if you know anyone struggling, maybe, just maybe, they need to be in this class, PMP exam immersion. You need to go on down to the website. It's hpmexam.com. I'm going to show you on the screen again, hpmexam.com. And we call it an immersion because we're truly going to immerse you 360, people, process, business, going through every single one of the 35 tasks. All right. Thank you very much for joining me, my friends. I wish you all the best as you work this journey to getting certified as a PMP.